the financial dimension of the debate, because when you say 25%, which is now the African Union official ceiling for financing of AU-led operations, it implies, invoking Chapter 8, that the remaining 75% would be financed by the international community, and in this case, meaning the United Nations. But we've seen with the G5 Sahel that it was more difficult, and that in principle, that is not really accepted by the UN, and we also see that in practice, it's more the European Union that finances AU operations more than the UN does. So you once again have that relationship with another regional actor that cannot be confined to the Chapter 8 debate. You know, on China, well, the increasing role of China is well known in crisis management terms. Figures are revealing of that increasing position. China is the first permanent member of the UN Security Council participating in UN peacekeeping operation, making China the first permanent member of the UN Security Council active in Africa through its role in peacekeeping operations. For a long time, China has been confined to logistical support, medical units, and more recently it has deployed infantry battalion that potentially, given the mandates in Mali and the Central African Republic, or it was South Sudan, given the protection of civilians mandate, could imply that Chinese troops would fight or would resort to force against some of the spoilers. That is a challenge for the established crisis management actors, again, be they states. And when I say states, it can be, you know, Nigeria, Ethiopia as strong troop contributing countries, but also the European Union or the UN in general. Maybe one scenario that I would like to throw at you that would be interesting would be that there are currently 2 countries that deploy national operations in Africa that are endorsed by the UN Security Council, which I think is a bit odd. It's Ethiopia in Abyei, and it's France through you know, all the, I'm talking about, you know, Licorne in Ivory Coast or Sangaris in the Central African Republic. There might come a moment when China will say, we want to be a kind of lead nation to a forthcoming peace support operation in a given country, and we go to the UN Security Council to get a legal mandate to be able to do that. And there might be a situation where, because other member states don't want to do it, and after all, they're happy if China wants to do it because there are, you know, threats of massive violations of human rights or things like this, that those countries would accept in the same vein as they accept when France does it, a bit closing their eyes, and that would be a very interesting development with a kind of qualitative leap forward, if I can use this word talking about China, in the crisis management domain, being a lead nation of a crisis management operation on African soil with all the political implications that it would bring.
Thank you. Sharif, what about the Maghreb?
Thank you. Just one point I wanted to clarify. I'm not calling for a break between Africa and then the rest of the world, or bringing the Africa for Africans slogan, but rather mentioning the danger of some countries, how they act in Africa. However, partnership is very important, especially from the international organizations, be it the UN, NATO, etc., etc. And I think that's even healthier because at least here we avoid the deep or the narrow national interests of some countries that in their partnerships with Africa, they respond to other things. Now for North Africa, and actually mainly Libya, maybe today Libya is bigger than the African Union. However, Libya proved that the African Union actually was not that efficient because, of course, in the beginning, the African Union as an organization said, oh, we're not involved in this and we refuse this intervention. But then they withdrew totally, and they allowed others to take the floor and to take over the situation. And 2, it also is a problem for the unity of the African Union itself, because then that showed that the African Union is actually working south to North Africa, as if North Africa was not part of the African Union. And so maybe we should ask ourselves today, is North Africa part of the African Union or not? On China in North Africa, well, we should welcome the arrival of China, and so it's yet another player in North Africa to add to all the others. Indeed, China has a vision, but I think on the long term, it will be yet another problem. Always better to have it with all the others. Maybe it will be a game of checks and balances with the other powers. But I think in the future, this will be another problem that North Africans and Africans in general will have to deal with. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Ambassador Mintorizzo.
Thank you. Well, I would like to come back to the issue raised by Dr. Tardy before, which I think is a very interesting issue. I speak about partnerships, and I think he made a very good point, which is not known enough. In theory, partnership in academic terms means what the word means, but in practical, in the real world, partnership is very difficult to achieve among, let's say, big powers. Let's call it that is not a correct term, but like big organizations like NATO and the European Union. I'm familiar with both organizations. I've seen the thing from both sides, and for instance, I know that there is continuously talk about increased cooperation, etc. And then on the other hand, in practice, it doesn't happen really, except on very specific issues, just because each big organization, in a way or in another, wishes to dominate and thinks that has to be the main partner. So I remember 15 or 20 years ago, something à la mode was to speak about interlocking organization. And I think it doesn't work very well.
Yes, there. No, not that gentleman at the back. You're going to speak tomorrow, huh? So you have plenty of time.
Thank you very much. During the discussions, there is one big country that was not mentioned at all, which is Russia. Does Russia have any role in Africa, or is it possible to assume that Russia is not there because it's good for Russia that NATO is going south and not east?
Yes. Russia is in the Security Council. Russia has always been present in Africa. The priority is the Middle East, of course, and Europe, but Russia has always been in projects in Africa. In the Security Council, Russia is present in the African issues. So, do you have any question to add to that, or any? Yes. Hafida, d'accord. Yeah, quelqu'un.
First of all, I wish to thank the NATO Defense College for giving us the opportunity to stay in this room and to have these nice speeches and so on. And I followed all the discussion, but I'm asking to myself, and I ask to you, what will be the 13th of May if US will exit from the adhesion to the peace overture in Iran, in other countries? This will reflect, of course, on Africa programs.
Hafida, please. No?
Thank you very much. I would like also to congratulate the speakers. I have just a remark for Mr. Youssef Sharif. You said just now that Africa was literally absent from the Libyan crisis. I pretend to know that there was a delegation headed by Ping, who was the former chairman of the African Commission. They went on mediation in Libya. They went on both sides. They tried their best. I even remember the name of the few ministers that were accompanying President Ping, president of the African Union Commission. And they went to Tripoli, they went to Benghazi. They have been doing their best, that's all. And I know that they have had a lot of difficulties because you know perfectly, better than I do, that there was too many external, exogenous interference and bombings. Very difficult to get a mediation during the war.
Yeah, of course, that mediation was there, but more or less that was it. And there was no more proactivity from the African Union. And again, it shows the limits of the African Union in.
And I agree with Mr. Tardy when he said Libya is too big for Africa. And you know what I mean.
I think about the, well, Mr. Jibril is here. I don't want to speak on behalf of Libyans. It is now up to the Libyans. It is up to the Libyans to decide on their future. We need to support them. And I didn't talk about Morocco. We hosted the first agreement for months between all the Libyans in Skhirat. It was the only agreement that the Libyan parties agreed upon, and it was difficult to implement it. That now people are talking about some amendments. But it is, I think, important to trust the Libyan different, it's not easy. It's a very difficult dossier, you know. We need tomorrow to listen to Mr. Jibril. We need to support the UN efforts, and we need to support the independence, the unity and sovereignty of the Libyans to define their own future. This, I think, is important. Yes, if there are no more questions, I would like to thank you for attending this panel. I think we have an ambition to, as Africans, to achieve peace and prosperity. Of course, we need to do our own homework internally, building regional coherent integration schemes. We need to promote economic development, and we need the instruments, and we need our partners on board. Thank you very much. Voilà. Terminé. C'est bon parce que we have left some people to. It's good. To speak.